Hello my friends, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new. Today we have a mid-month reading wrap-up for you. Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. I had planned originally to do just like a weekly reading wrap-up, and then with the way the dates that I filmed this, it actually is going to be a mid-month reading wrap-up because I'm filming this on the 14th, so that's close enough to the middle of the month. So we're going to talk about the 7 books that I have read so far this year. 2 of them I'm going to kind of gloss over. One is a Patreon book, and I will review that in future videos, but I haven't released the exclusive video for my patrons yet, so I'm just going to mention that I read it. And the other one is part of the Rake Appreciation Society book club that I do with Jen from the Book Refuge. That's one of our book club picks for our August book club show, so I'm not going to go into a ton of detail for that either because I do like to kind of keep my opinions mostly under wraps until we do our live show, just because I feel like it's funner that way. It's funner for Jen and I to discuss them, and it's more fun for the people who are watching to kind of find out in the moment. But we've had some misses in our book club picks for the last little while, but the discussion and the conversation is always so fun and so engaging and just really great. So if you are interested at all in reading those, please do and join us. There are full details on that on Jen's channel. We haven't actually announced when the live show will be. I will post it here when we have that figured out. So alright, so the first book that I read in July was The Perfect Waltz by Gracie. So in June, I read The Perfect Rake, which was book 1 in the series of these, I believe it's the Merryweather sisters. I really, really loved The Perfect Rake. I thought it was, honestly, I thought it was a perfect historical romance. I just loved it. I adored it. I really do like this author's writing style. I think that she has a very engaging and compulsively readable writing style that just hits my brain in a way that I just love, and every single book I've read from her so far has done that for me. Even if I haven't like 100% loved the book, I just really have a great time getting sucked into her stories, and I think that she does a great job. And one thing I really like about her books is how much she focuses on either family or found family. So this series follows a group of sisters who are orphans, and they're being raised by their grandfather, and they have been under some pretty severe physical abuse, like he beats them routinely. So in the first book, they find their way escaping him. But in this book, we're dealing with one of the other sisters. Her name is Hope, and how she's kind of trying to move forward in that way. Hope is everything that you think someone named Hope should be. Like, not only is she beautiful on the outside, but she is so sweet and kind and cheerful, like to the point where I think if this were done by another author who doesn't have as good of a grasp for, you know, like exploring her characters and making them feel real, I think she would definitely fall into a stereotype. And there are probably parts of her that do in this book fall into very stereotypical cardboard cutout type of archetypes of characters, but maybe it's just the fact that I enjoy this author's writing so much that I am able to forgive that. But I do also believe that she very much gives this heroine a lot of depth and a lot of nuance. And the thing that I think makes that shine especially clear in here is that the hero, Sebastian, who is looking for a wife, he desperately needs to find a wife. He has just found out that some of his younger sisters have suffered abuse as well, and so he's trying to find someone to kind of help heal them. Again, like, this is something that I feel like, what is the book that I read that did this before? Oh, it was Wives and Daughters by Elizabeth Gaskell, where a lot of times in this historical type of setting, and this isn't just a modern day historical romance writer type of thing, because we saw this in Wives and Daughters by Elizabeth Gaskell, a lot of times that's what if the man is a widow or something where there are children involved, his go-to answer to that is, oh, I gotta find a wife to take care of this problem. Like, I'm not gonna take care of it, right? And that can be a difficult thing to see as a modern reader, where we definitely expect our heroes to step up and fill that role and not just land all that work on the woman. But anyway, that's not anything that dragged this book down for me. So Sebastian is looking for a wife, and he ends up picking like the literal most mousy, not even just mousy in looking, but very like subdued, the thing that I think you would stereotypically think of a governess as who's going to be the wife, because he thinks that she is going to be someone who will raise his sisters and help them through the struggles that they're going through. he, of course, ends up seeing Hope in a waltz at a dance, and he falls for her. Like, not necessarily in love with her, but he is so struck with her beauty and her presence and everything about her. He doesn't know anything about the hardships that she's been through or what she has, like, had to overcome to be who she is today. He just sees her as beautiful, and then he kind of fills in the gaps about her personality because of how beautiful she is. So it's very much a case of he stereotypes her because of her beauty and doesn't consider that she may have things happening beneath the surface. Hope, for her part, falls in love with him right off the bat. Like, this is a case of she falls in love with him right off the bat, very much insta-love type of thing. Sebastian has a friend who, actually, one of the best parts about this book is the secondary love story with Sebastian's friend. And he knows a little bit about Hope's backstory and her family history, and he kind of tries to tell that to our hero, but our hero is so stubborn and is not going to see any of that he's just sort of like, no, she's kind of like a cotton-headed ninny muggins, she's just beautiful, she's not going to make a good wife for me. So that's one of the things that made this book a little frustrating for me. Even though I've talked about, like, I find Anne Gracie's stories very consuming, I really enjoy reading them, I like them for the most part. This book I gave 4 stars, and honestly, there was a lot to be annoyed with if it weren't for those things that I like so much in this author's writing. Because Sebastian, for his part, really doesn't see anything about Hope other than she's beautiful, something to lust after, until almost like 70% of the way through the book. So up until that point, he very much doesn't even really see her as a person. He sees her as an object that he desires physically. And you know, that's one of my least favorite things. I hate when our heroes do that. I hate when a romantic lead does that, because why am I rooting for this guy who literally only sees her as a TNA and just a pretty face? Like, I just don't care about a dude like that, right? Now, there were some things about this hero that made him more endearing, and I think a lot of that, again, is this author's writing style and how she really does a good job. Even characters that you don't particularly like, she shows you different aspects of them so that you can like them in a certain way. So, anyway, I liked this. This was not at all as good as The Perfect Rake, and I do want to continue on in this series. I gave it 4 stars, and I feel like it was probably like 3.5, but I rounded up to 4. Okay, so now this is the Patreon book that I'm just going to mention, but our Patreon book club book of the month is Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I read this, listened to it on... You okay? My goodness. Listened to it on audio at the library, and as soon as I finished it, I had to go get a physical copy. That's all I'm going to say about that. So, okay, moving right along. So the next book that I read is Luna and the Lie by Mariana Zapata. This has been on my shelf for what feels like a million years. Probably not, because I don't think it's been out. Did this come out post 2020? No, 2018. So this has been here for a while. And I am really trying to make my way through books that I own physically, because I love buying books, I love owning books, I love collecting books, I do, and I don't feel like that's a bad thing, because I feel like it's a separate hobby than reading books, and I know I don't have to justify that because you guys probably get that, but there has been a bit of a conversation about overconsumption in the booktube and the book just community as a whole, and I do try to be very careful about how I spend my resources and to utilize them the best I can. So all of that being said, I use my library quite a lot. And I don't know why I threw that in there. Anyway, I've been meaning to get through my physical copy. So Luna and the Lie was a book that I had on my July TBR that was, I had 2 that are either I have to read it or I have to get rid of it. Like, this is the month you're either reading it or getting rid of it. So this was, of course, one of the earliest books I picked up because I didn't want to just unhaul it, because these books are not cheap, right? And if I love it, I want to keep it. So Luna and the Lie, Mariana Zapata, slow burn, contemporary romance. Absolutely loved this. I absolutely loved this. And, you know, it's interesting because I have been reading her. I think I picked up my first one by her in 2018, actually. I think that is when I first read my first Mariana Zapata. I read the big heavy hitters from Lukov with Love, Culty, love both of those for sure. And then I've read some of her recent releases that I haven't loved as much, like All Roads Lead Here. I didn't hate that, but it was just okay. It was 3 stars. Her newest one, the paranormal romance, Things We Water, I believe, I gave that one 3 stars. And I was really, because of those 2 recent ones that I haven't absolutely loved like I did the other 2, I've been real nervous to get back to her backlist, because there are a ton of books in her backlist that I haven't read yet. So this one, didn't know anything about it going into it. I just picked it up, started reading it, Absolutely loved it. This reminds me of why I love this author and why I love her books. Everything about this is everything that I love in contemporary romance in a Mariana Zapata. This has a beautiful slow burn romance that feels so earned that by the time you get to the end of this, when they're actually together, it feels like every single page of slow burn was 100% worth it. The tension and the romantic development, the character development, everything in here is like peak 10 out of 10. I feel like I just loved it. This is why I love slow burn romance. Everything in here was just perfect for me. I loved it. I loved our grumpy hero. There's an age gap. She's 26, he's 41, which honestly isn't my favorite. I don't love an age gap, but Mariana Zapata has made that work for me before in Culty, and it definitely worked for me here. Like, I just love this. I love Luna, our heroine. She works in a mechanic shop. She paints cars, and she's been working there for a really long time. The old man who owns the store, she kind of sees him as a father figure. She's essentially been raising her sisters because of a big fallout that happened with her family, which is a secret we don't find out until we're further into the book. And she's an admirable character. Like, she's a character that you really, really love, that you can't help but love, because she is so earnest in everything that she does. And there are a few, like, if I have a little bit of a critique about this book, and honestly I don't have many because I enjoyed it so much, it is that she's a bit naive. I think a little bit deliberately obtuse, so that the author can kind of progress things with the relationship and maybe not have her be so obvious. She does seem a little bit oblivious to some things with Rip, specifically, our hero. But man, I don't even care, because I just love this. I love the side characters. I love the plot with her sisters and, you know, the things we find out about Rip and his life. I just adored this. And it really, like, reaffirms to me how a skilled author that you really connect with, right? Because there are authors that are skilled that you might not connect with, but a skilled author who hits what you're looking for, they can write about literally anything and you will love it. Like, I firmly believe that. So that's how this author is for me. She's very skilled, and when she's like writing what I think is a good romance, like, she's hitting every single thing that I want from that book, and that's exactly what happened here. This was a favorite. I loved it so much. I listened to the audiobook, which was narrated really, really well, because honestly, the audiobook was $2, okay? So I do have the paperback, but I did listen to the audiobook because it was on sale for $2, so I don't feel bad about that. And this is one of the few books that as soon as I finished it, I wanted to start it back up again. I just loved it. I loved it so much. Deeply romantic, a ton of character growth and development, just a really beautiful story, and I adored it. So yeah, I get to keep it now because I read it, and I'm so happy I finally did. And now it makes me, every time I finish a book that's been sitting on my shelves for years, I'm always like, what else is on here that's going to be a favorite book of mine? What else are on my shelves that I just haven't read yet, that's been sitting there for years, you know? So loved it. I know it's not a new book by any means. I know most people have read it, but I freaking adored this and highly recommend it. Like, it was so good. It's like 600 pages, and every single page was worth it to me. So that's saying something. Okay, now the next one is one of my most disappointing reads, and I almost really hate to even talk about it. I did leave a Goodreads review for this, so if you follow me on Goodreads, you probably already saw my thoughts and feelings on this. And honestly, I've debated going back and deleting it because it's getting a good bit of, it's getting a decent amount of traction on Goodreads, and I just feel a little bad. So anyway, These Summer Storms by Sarah MacLean. This is one of my most anticipated reads of the year. I've been so eagerly anticipating this. I am a huge fan of Sarah MacLean. I love her historical romances. I don't believe there is anything that I have read from her that I have rated below 4 stars. And some of my all-time favorite books are written by Sarah MacLean. Like, I think there are so many of her historical romances that are my favorite books that she is definitely like my second favorite historical romance author. Lisa Kleypas and then Sarah MacLean. Like, that's how much I love this author. That's how much I believe in her talent. That's how much I think that her work connects with me on such a deep level, both in like things that she's saying about, you know, social things that are happening in our world, how she puts that in a historical context. Like, I do enjoy that, but specifically like the way she writes these men who worship the heroine. I just love it. I love it so much. So I knew going into These Summer Storms that this was a contemporary fiction book with a romantic subplot or some type of a hint of romance. So I want to be super clear. If you know, you happen to stumble upon this video and you don't know anything about me, I don't just read romance. That's mostly what I'm reading right now, and honestly that's most of what I've read my whole life, but I do read, and I have read broadly in all genres, so I'm not coming to Sarah MacLean's contemporary fiction debut expecting it to be a romance. I know it wasn't going to be. And I'm not coming to that hoping for a romance because that's all I've read, right? So I knew what I was getting into, and I was still excited for it because I think Sarah MacLean is just a great storyteller, a great writer. She's so talented. And she has a great vision for her ideas and a really great way of executing that, and that results in a powerful story, not just a romance, right? I even hate to say just a romance because I don't think that romance should be said as just a romance. Like, romance is powerful. Anyway, soapboxing, I don't mean to do that. So, these summer storms, I had an arc of this and I tried to pick it up a couple of times, but the beginning chapter really kind of put me off a little bit because it definitely feels like it's going for something literary in vibe. And it feels very deliberate. It feels very obvious that that's kind of what is happening there, because there is a little diatribe about trains and how the heroine feels about trains and her reflections on them. And I started reading that and I was like, I don't know how I feel about this, right? So I waited for the audiobook because I do like this audiobook narrator and I've listened to Sarah MacLean's audios before. So I actually pre-ordered the audio. The day it released, I started listening to it, and I have to say that this is, up to this point, one of my most disappointing reads of the year, and I'm so sad about that. I gave it 2 stars. I didn't like much about this book. That's not to say that it's terrible. I've definitely read worse. I think this is a case of my expectations for what I know this author can do was higher than what I felt like I got in this story. So it's basically the story of a family of very wealthy people. Like, I believe the patriarch of the family is a billionaire. He has recently passed away, and there is some lawyer involved who gets all the family together to go to this island, the Storm Island, where they would go for the summer. Come to find out, it's sort of like a series of inheritance games where these siblings and the wife, they have to obey these rules, do these jobs that he has essentially left for them in his will for them to be able to get an inheritance from him. And in order for them to get that inheritance, every single sibling has to do their job. Like, if anyone opts out, none of them get the money, right? So that is sort of an interesting way to keep them all invested, because there is a good amount of tension between these siblings. They don't always get along, and there is some drama there, some drama. I think, when I think about how I actually feel about this book, like, I think as I was reading this, the whole time I kept thinking, okay, when are we going to get to the plot? Like, what is the point of this book? When are things going to be picking up? Like, so much of this book is just spent endlessly in the heads of these varying different wealthy, rich, whiny kids. And we find out a little bit about them and their backstory, but none of it is super compelling. Like, these are whiny rich people who are not as bad as you think they should be to make this a really compelling, interesting story, but they don't really have anything at all redeeming about them either. They just sort of languish in this very whiny, entitled, privileged area that is not interesting enough, really, to keep my attention. So the whole time I felt like I was just waiting for something to happen. Like, there's secrets that are teased that I was like, okay, I think this is what it is, but if it's not, if it's something else, that's going to be really clever. So I was kind of thinking there was going to be some mystery element that never really came to fruition. The secrets that are teased, when they're revealed, I was sort of like, okay, I saw that coming, you know? And overall, I feel like this just felt so flat. This felt very flat. There's no plot arc, there's no story arc, there's really no character arc, there's just nothing about this. This is just an isolated moment on this island of rich people who are bickering a little bit about the past and about the money, and, you know, and there's bad feelings, they've done some terrible things, but nothing that is really like rich people drama, you know? So I just felt like this really just left a lot to be desired. There wasn't anything about this that necessarily gripped me. There wasn't anything about this that compelled me to keep reading. I was reading because I kept hoping it was going to get better. But most of the time I was just really, really bored. And all of that being said, there is a romance between the heroine Alice and, I don't even know if I can call her heroine, like the main character Alice and another main character Jack, who, you know, he's kind of the one who's running the estate. There is a little bit of a romance there, but again, that just felt like so watered down, milquetoast, like meh. Everything about this book really just felt very meh, average. Like I wanted to care. I wanted to feel something passionately. And I think that if you're setting up a contemporary fiction with some mysterious element of an inheritance with rich people, you should have something that is making you feel deeply, like anger, frustration, shock, you know, like maybe you're just sucked into the drama, and I don't feel like any of that was here. Everything felt very predictable. Nothing in here felt necessarily riveting, or I don't know. So I just feel like this book was lacking a lot of heart and a lot of compulsive readability. And when I say heart, I don't necessarily mean like I'm looking for good things. I mean like that throbbing pulse of a book that gives you like its essence, like its feeling, like it's almost like it's its own entity, like that type of thing about a book that it has that just like grips you. Because some of my favorite books that haunt me, that I can never let go of, I would say that they have a lot of heart, but they're not happy-go-lucky books, like The Road by Cormac McCarthy, like Deathless by Catherine Valente. Like there's something in there that is meaty, that is its soul, that compels you to read it, to think about it, to chew it over. And this had none of that, right? And when I think about the other book that I read, the Taylor Jenkins Reid, again, like I don't want to give anything away, but that had so much of that element. And then to go to something like this, that is a similar type of contemporary fiction, and it had none of it, like it was glaring, the opposites of the two of those, right? And I would honestly say that Sarah MacLean is every bit as talented as Taylor Jenkins Reid. I just feel like this was just a miss. I think that this didn't have anything really that had me thinking, anything that really had me feeling. It was just, and it wasn't entertaining either. I don't know, I was disappointed. I was really disappointed, and one of the things that I said in my review is that it really shocked me that Sarah MacLean wrote a contemporary fiction book about billionaires with literally nothing to say in any social commentary type of way about that. Like, I did hear about like a book event that she went to, and that was one of the questions somebody asked is, you know, like, so what do you, something, I don't remember exactly the question, but it was something like, why did you write about the patriarchy in 2025 or something like that? And her response was, well, I killed the patriarch, which, like, I get that and I see that, but still, it would have been more compelling if there had been something about, like, how he died or how this, I don't know. It was just, this wasn't a mystery. There wasn't, and I know it wasn't, I was disappointed, okay? I was really disappointed, and that's all I have to say about that. So I'm gonna be really apprehensive about any future books from Sarah MacLean that aren't historical romance, because, you know, I do love seeing an author like change and try things out of their comfort zone or try passion projects that they really want to do. Like, I will always support and try those, but that doesn't mean it's going to work for me. And I think that this may be just a case of Sarah MacLean having maybe some growing pains, because it didn't feel like she was comfortable in this format. This didn't feel like she could use her whole arsenal of talent and skills in writing, because this was maybe something she wasn't 100% comfortable in. Anyway, it was disappointing. Let's move right along. So the next book I read is The Viscount and the Vixen. So this is a historical romance. This is actually, I think, is this book 2 or 3 in this series? I can't ever remember if this is book 2 or if this is book 3. I think this may be book 3 in the series. Anyway, The Viscount and the Vixen by Lorraine Heath. I have not had great luck in the last year or so of books that I've been picking up by Lorraine Heath. Something that I have noticed that has become more and more apparent to me as I've read, I think it may just have to do with the books that I've picked from her, or it could be just me as well. It really could just be me. But she does have a specific archetype of hero that I don't really love anymore. And if I have loved him in the past, I feel like it's just not working for me anymore. And that is a very lust-driven hero. And she does write him a lot. Like, a lot of her books focus on that. Now, that's not to say that he's static, because her heroes typically do have a good character arc. But that's still a little off-putting for me. That's my least favorite type of romance hero. I just don't want to read about that. That to me, that feels very basic. That feels, you know, I've talked about that a lot before, so I'm not going to go into it here. Anyway, so when I opened this book, which starts with our hero, who is the Viscount, He's not married. His father is a widower. His father was deeply in love with his wife. She died tragically, and he has essentially, they say that he has become mad from the loss of his wife. And so the Viscount, his son, has sworn off of falling in love because he's seen how it's affected his father. Now, the father actually desperately wants to have an heir, and he has seen that his son is not going to marry or have children, so he's like, okay, I'm going to have to find somebody and produce an heir myself. So he puts an ad out, and Portia, our heroine, comes, and the Viscount Locke, our hero, he immediately thinks that she is just a money hunter, a fortune hunter, and that she's going to ruin his father. So there's a little clause in the potential contract that they have, and Locke sees a way to save his father and offer himself up as tribute, basically, to marry Portia instead, not realizing that that was actually his father's plan the whole time, right? Because the father has never fallen out of love with his beloved wife who died so tragically. He has yearned and pined and grieved for her. And that was one of my favorite things about this book, was the father's love for his wife and how much he talks about her and how he feels about her. And while it is sad that he's just been mourning her for all these years, it was still just so deeply romantic and beautiful that he never let go of that. And I just, like, it moved me. It moved me. It was one of my favorite parts of this book. So Portia and Locke end up getting married, and there is a ton of heat between the two of them, like a ton. And some of the things that Locke says to Portia in the very beginning, which I do believe are intended to shock her, that are very sexual in nature, if this had been written, and very early on, like we're talking like first chapter, if this had been written by a new to me author, I would have DNF'd it, because I just find that so off-putting. I just don't want to read about that. And please don't confuse what I'm saying. Like, I don't think that lust-based romances don't have a place. It's just not my preference, and I specifically don't like that when that is what we see of our hero first and foremost. Like, I want to see that he values her in other ways, or that he is drawn to her in other ways, just than how her body looks and how his body is responding to her, right? So I persevered, however, because a lot of people told me they really loved this book, and I wanted to see if I loved it as well, because The Earl Takes All, which is in this series, is one of my favorite Lorraine Heath books of all time, and it's the only book I've read in this series. So I persevered. We do get a lot of quiet moments between the two of them, and there is a great amount of tension and chemistry between these two, and a lot of push and pull as they experience their physical relationship, and then that drives their emotional relationship, and then how they both kind of feel themselves getting into that emotional relationship, and then they kind of want to withdraw. And like, it's very complicated because they both have a good amount of emotional baggage coming into this, but they still not only have physical feelings for one another, but they also have a lot of emotional chemistry right from the get-go. They just are both loath to admit it, and they don't really want to acknowledge that their feelings are growing and developing. And that's something that I think Lorraine Heath did really excellently here, is that she shows you how their emotions are growing and developing in a way that is not obvious to the characters as we're in their heads and their thought processes. So I found that to be just so well done, where you as the reader are seeing there's something other than just chemistry, physical chemistry and lust. There is emotion. There's something that is really growing and developing between these two. Meanwhile, it's just on the surface, you're thinking it's just they're just trying to like slake their lust. So I thought that was really, really well done. And once again, by the time I got to the end of this book, I was so won over by it. I really loved it. I loved watching the growth and development of these characters. Like, when I say that I want a book that shows great growth of hero and heroine, this is one of the perfect examples of that. I loved watching them grow. I loved watching them grow to care for one another and grow as individuals. And by the time we get to the end and their romance is fully realized, I was so happy, so content with where this was at. I was loving it. I had a great time with this. So I couldn't really decide on a star rating, because my feelings when I began this were so different than my feelings when I finished it, that sometimes I was like, oh, is this a 5? Is this a 4? Is this a 5? Is this a 4? I couldn't quite decide, right? I think I am going to settle on a 5-star, but with a caveat of 4.5. 4.5 rounded up to 5. Like, this is not the same type of 5-star as Luna and the Lie is, which honestly may be a 6-star. I can't decide about that either. But this was so good and so worth the read, and if you're anything like me and you kind of are initially put off by a very lust-driven hero, this is one of those books that I think, like, you gotta finish it. You gotta see it through to the end, because his growth was fantastic. And honestly, seeing that change in him, seeing him grow and change on the page, was such a night and day difference to my experience reading Flowers from the Storm, who also begins with a hero that is off-putting in the beginning, that he is very lust-driven, but he remains that way. And not to say that his desire for her, Locke's desire for Portia, ever diminishes. He still wants her just as much. It's just that there are other things that are added to him and other things that compel him to feel about her other than just her body. And I think that's especially impactful here because of the secret that Portia is keeping and what happens when Locke finds out. Like, this was just honestly fantastic. And I am going to give it 5 stars because I feel like this is an excellent historical romance and I would highly recommend it. Yeah, so I love books like that. I love books that when I start them, I'm like, I don't know how I feel about this, right? And then by the time I get to the end, I'm like, wow, that was good. That was good storytelling. That was good writing. That was good romance. And that's how I feel about this book. So 5 stars. All right, and then we have another disappointing read, and I hate to even say this because I really enjoyed the first book and I was so excited to continue with this series, but it is Resisting Miss Merryweather. Resisting Miss Merryweather by Emily Larkin. So this is, I thought this was book 2 in her Baleful Godmother series, which is historical romance with a little bit of a fantastical element of a fairy godmother and magic. It's very light. So I put this on my TBR, and then when I actually tried to go find it, I found this on Hoopla, actually, where most of them were where I could listen to it. I realized this is actually a novella, and it's book 1.5. Now, I usually don't like novellas. They're just not for me. I feel like it's a very rare thing for an author to give me the character development, the romantic development, everything. Like, I want meaty, developed characters and stories and romances. And I think that that's hard to do in a novella, and most of the time, for what I'm looking for, they don't deliver. So I tend to stay away from novellas. I really, really do. But it was on my TBR, and I wanted to continue with the series, and I felt like there must be something in here that I need to know in future books, so I read it. And honestly, I do want to continue the series, and when I get to the second book, if I feel like this is inessential, like, I'm gonna be so upset because I didn't like this at all. This has everything I don't like about a novella. I gave it 2 stars. The writing is solid, of course. The world is already established, but the characters were weak. The romance was just pitiful. Like, the story was honestly, like, kind of ridiculous. It had, like, the ending in here kind of upset me a little bit with a plot device, and I just didn't like this at all. The only thing that was good about this is that it was short, so I was able to finish it pretty quickly. But essentially we have Barnaby, who is a character that we meet in the first book. Now, he is an interesting character because in the first book, the hero's wife basically cheated on him with Barnaby, who was the hero's best friend. And when the hero from the first book finds out, he's devastated. And we find out more things about his dead wife, how manipulative she was, how villainous that she was, that give Barnaby, the cheater, a good bit of sympathy, right? Because she wasn't exactly honest with him about what was going on in her life. So there is a really touching scene in the first book when Barnaby and Marcus, the hero from the first book, have this attempt at reconciliation because they were childhood friends. Like, they had a friendship. And there's an attempt at reconciliation there that isn't 100% realized. So I was really excited to get his story and see how that was going to be repaired and see what was going to happen to him, because Barnaby comes into this feeling like he can't be a husband to anybody because he cuckolded another man's wife, and so he feels like that has really hit his self-esteem and his feelings of, well, I'm not a real good man because I, did this to another man, but also like my best friend. So he's kind of dealing with the emotional impact of that. And then we have Mary, who is a distant cousin of the heroine from the first book. Obviously, it has to stay in the line. That's how the fairy godmother thing works. It stays in the family line. And she is 100% a stereotypical character. Like, there's nothing really about her that is conflicted. There's nothing about her that has any depth or layers or nuance. Like, she's just a flat placeholder vehicle for him to fall in love with and for her to save him. And this was just lacking in basically every way. Like, there was no development of romance, character, plot. It was just very, very shallow and disappointing. And I think that, again, like, there were some things I didn't love about the first book, with specifically how the romance was handled towards the end. Like, I wish that it had been a little bit different. But the way that she developed the heroine in the first book was fantastic. She was the shining star. I loved watching her really fight for her agency and really have a lot of different things about her to, like, think about and reflect on and see, like, how she grew to be this person and how strong she was, but also how vulnerable she was. Like, I just really love that heroine. And the heroine in here, Mary, is just a paper doll. Like, there's nothing about her like that. So it's interesting to go from the first book in this series that felt so richly developed in character and plot and story to go to this, which wasn't developed at all. Like, disappointing. 2 stars. Okay, and then the last book I'm not going to give you a star rating on. I'm just going to briefly talk about it. It's for the Rake Appreciation Society, which is coming up in August. It's The Beast of Clan Kincaid. So this is a Highlander historical romance, which I love. I listened to the audio of this. I thought it was really an entertaining audio. For the first half of this, I was, like, hooked. I was really enjoying it. I was really happy with what was happening here. We have our hero whose father was basically killed, and he's trying to go as undercover into this new laird's home territory as, like, not necessarily a mercenary, but as a hired sword, maybe. And he ends up rescuing his daughter, and they have a ton of chemistry, like, right off the bat. But nobody knows that he's actually secretly there to overthrow the current laird and take his place, what he feels like is rightfully his, how it was taken from his family. And things get complicated, of course, when he starts falling in love with the daughter. So this had such a great setup, such a great premise. I really liked the storytelling. I liked the characters. I don't really want to say a ton about how I feel about it, other than I really disliked the ending. I really disliked the ending. I feel like this is one of those books that 100% failed on sticking the landing. Like, anyway, that's all. You'll have to come to our Rake Appreciation Society live show to hear us talk about it, because I'm really curious to hear what everybody else feels about it, if they felt like that too. There are other things I want to talk about this book, but I'm going to save it until then. So anyway, there you have it. That is my mid-month wrap-up for July. Those are the 7 books that I have read so far. Let me know what your favorite book you have read so far this month is, and if you want to just let me know you were here, please leave me a... I don't even know. What should we leave? Something easy? I always do hearts. Leave me a unicorn emoji, because I like unicorns. And I'll see y'all in my next video.